Once crossed into 3 vicious offspring, the stepmother was thrown into the river. If it weren't for her crossing over, wouldn't she have been killed by these 3 cubs? Manxiu absolutely cannot tolerate it. Education should start with children. Bear kids should start beating from a young age. After a long time, boss. My mother goes up in the hall and down in the kitchen, second person. My mother is capable of both literature and martial arts, third person. Auntie, great. Watching the transformation of the 3 cubs, Manxiu smiled with satisfaction. Keywords of the novel. The fierce stepmother of the farmhouse, becoming rich with her babies without pop-ups. The fierce stepmother of the farmhouse, becoming rich with her babies. Download the complete set of TXT, the fierce stepmother of the farmhouse, becoming rich with her babies. Latest chapter for reading. Chapter 1. Accidentally becoming the stepmother of the 3 bunnies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Accidentally becoming the stepmother of the 3 bunnies. Help. Help. Help me. A woman kept splashing in the water, and 2 children stood on the riverbank, coldly watching the woman in the river remain indifferent. The 2 children are about 11 or 12 years old, with a childish expression on their older faces, but with a coldness in their eyes that peers should not have. The younger one looked nervously at the boy beside him and spoke timidly. Brother, can we do this? He's our mother. She's not our mother died long ago. If it weren't for her, our father wouldn't have died, Gao Yuanshan said with a cold expression on his face, but Gao Chanhe looked at the woman sinking in the river with some fear. Gao Yuanshan touched his younger brother's head and said, Don't worry, she's dead. Let's go find our uncle and aunt, they will take care of us. When there were no more women in the river, Gao Yuanshan immediately looked frightened and shouted loudly, Someone! Come quickly! My mother fell into the river. The children's shouts attracted other people in the village. Several villagers hurriedly jumped down the river to retrieve the woman who had fallen into the water, but she had already lost her breath. My throat was suffocating and I couldn't catch my breath. Manxiu coughed a few times and spat out several mouthfuls of water before slowly recovering. Manxiu opened her eyes and found a large group of men and women gathered around her, staring at her with big eyes. There are 2 children next to them, one with a cold and cowardly face. What situation? What's going on with this bunch of people wearing ancient costumes? No camera, not filming. Manxiu regained her composure. She couldn't have traveled through time, could she? In a daze, a memory flooded into my mind. The original owner married into the Zhou family a month ago and didn't want her husband to die as soon as she got married, leaving behind 3 bear children. Those 3 children believed that the original owner had killed their parents and held a grudge against the original owner. They pushed her into the river while she was washing clothes and drowned her. And now Manxiu has become the scapegoat. Looking at these 2 children, Manxiu was filled with anger. She flipped over and kicked the 2 children to the ground one by one. Hey! You! At least 2 dolls saved you, how could you treat them like this? The village chief slowly picked up the 2 dolls and pulled them aside. Help me! I was pushed into the water by these 2 unscrupulous bear kids, otherwise I would have been lucky and drowned long ago. Ah, this! The villagers couldn't help but be shocked upon hearing this. They didn't expect the 2 dolls of the Gao family to have such thoughts. The village chief was also stumped for a long time and couldn't speak, so he could only accompany Manxiu with a smiling face to appease her. Well. The parents of Yuanshan and Chanhe died early, young, and there's still a little girl in the family. You were married into the family after the child's father passed away. The children miss their parents, so you have to bear with them more. Manxiu's mouth twitched slightly, please bear with her. So she deserved to be pushed into the river. She glanced at the 2 children being guarded by the village chief behind her. Gao Yuanshan looked at him coldly, with a provocative smile on his lips. Gao Chanhe timidly hid behind his brother, his two dark little eyes fixed on her tightly, without any ill intentions. Gu Manxiu's heart turned cold. At such a young age, she is so cunning that she cannot accompany her. She pinched her tender flesh and tears welled up in her eyes, saying, "Village chief, give me a review. When I got married, my husband died. I became a widow at a young age and had to take care of my husband's 3 children. Even though I was a yellow flower girl, I became a stepmother." She desperately squeezed out a few crocodile tears and said, "I'm frugal, everything is tight for the 3 children first. In this month, I have been working tirelessly, doing everything. The 3 children are young and immature, so it's okay not to help me with my work. I have been working tirelessly to serve them, and that's all they want to do. Village chief, I can't stay here any longer. You better let me go." Gu Manxiu's crying resonated with the women in the village, who also began to voice their grievances for Gu Manxiu. The men remained silent upon seeing the situation. Although Gu Manxiu was the stepmother, she really treated those 3 children as if she were her own. There was a person hidden in the crowd, watching this scene with great interest. Unexpectedly, Gao Changhe suddenly shouted and rushed towards Gu Manxiu, beating her incessantly. "It's all you. It's all you. You killed my parents. You're not my mother. My mother is already dead. It's all because she married your father. You give me back my parents." The villagers saw this scene, but they had no doubt about Gu Manxiu and came forward to hold on to Gao Changhe. "Why don't you know how to be grateful, kid? Your mother is so kind to you, and you still want to kill her." The village chief pulled Gao Changhe aside and walked over to comfort Gu Manxiu. "Child, I know you suffer, but no matter how hard it is, you have to live a life, right? These 3 children have lost their parents. If you let go of them, no one will care about them." The village chief's tone may be calm, but his attitude cannot be refused. Gu Manxiu expressed her attitude when she saw that the village chief had no intention of letting her go. "Since that's the case, then I'll stay. I can't ignore these 3 people vertically or horizontally. I admit I've never been a disadvantage to them. Even if the villagers are doing anything wrong, they can't blame me for treating them bad. Otherwise, I'll just go home. Anyway, I'm young and beautiful, there will always be men who value me." The village chief saw Gu Manxiu saying this, and it was no longer easy to say anything, so he had to agree to Gu Manxiu. Gu Manxiu saw the village chief nod and agree to her request, but she didn't say anything anymore. She glanced at the old man and the second man crouching on the side with a gloomy face, and walked over to kick their buttocks one by one. "Go. Go to the river and wash your clothes yourself." Although the eldest and the second had resentment in their hearts, they dared not act in front of the villagers and had to go to the river to wash clothes in anger. The villagers couldn't bear to see it, so they advised, "The child is still young. You let them wash clothes by the river. If something happens, how can you explain it to his parents?" Gu Manxiu sneered, "If you can't bear to look at it, would you help wash this clothes? If it really hurts, then you can also take care of these 3 children at home, which saves me a lot of trouble." After she finished speaking, she shook her sleeves and was about to leave. The village chief quickly came over to stop Gu Manxiu upon seeing the situation. "Why bother, fellow villagers? He's also kind-hearted. I apologize for him here. Boss, don't make your mother angry in the future. If your mother doesn't care about you anymore, the 3 of you will have no home in the future, do you hear me?" Gao Yuanshan and Gao Changhe nodded reluctantly and went to the river to wash clothes. The village chief saw that the situation had calmed down, so he sent the villagers to go home separately. Gu Manxiu nodded contentedly as she looked at her boss and mistress. "Remember to go home and have dinner after washing your clothes." The boss kicked over the laundry basin, and the whole basin of clothes floated in the river. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. This child owes a lesson. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. This child owes a lesson. Gu Manxiu sneered at the situation and said, "What's wrong? You're not willing to." Gao Yuanshan turned his head and glared fiercely at her without speaking. Gu Manxiu looked nonchalant and said, "It's okay. If you run out of clothes, you'll run out. Anyway, it's nice to be naked in the hot weather." Gao Changhe was infuriated and his eyes turned red in an instant. He shouted loudly, "Don't think that with the support of the village chief, I dare not do anything to you. You are a murderer. Not my mother. I don't have a mother like you." Gao Changhe sat on the ground and cried loudly. Gao Yuanshan looked at his younger brother with some heartache, but he couldn't do anything to this woman. He sighed and could only go down the river to pick up all his clothes. Gu Manxiu rolled her eyes at the boss and the second, patted her buttocks, and went home. The crowd watching the excitement gradually dispersed, and the man hiding in the dark lowered his hat, concealing the ferocity in his eyes. Undoubtedly, he is a treacherous sycophant who colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country. He could have dealt such a harsh blow to his stepmother at a young age. Jiang Yichen's eyes narrowed slightly, and a killing intent flashed through her eyes. In his past life, Gao Yuanshan slandered him for colluding with the enemy and betraying the country, causing him to lose his reputation and die from a car accident. Since heaven wants him to live a new life, if he calmly touched the hidden weapon at his waist, and a hint of sinister intent appeared on his thin lips. "Xiaoshanzi, clothes can't be washed like this." The woman next to her couldn't bear to look, so she stepped forward and snatched away her clothes. "Look, this is how it has to be." Jiang Yichen pursed her lips, put down her hand, and turned to leave. "Many people have mixed eyes, let you go first." Gu Manxiu followed her memory back home and saw the Sodot called home. The Gao family, with only 2 rooms and a stove, was filled with poverty. Just as she was about to enter the door, she was suddenly blocked by a small figure. Gao Xiaoyue was leaning back on her chubby little face and using a pair of small fleshy hands to push her outward. "Bad woman. Bad woman. Little Moon, otherwise Ni. However, the little girl has little strength, short arms, short legs, and a soft and fluffy texture, making it impossible to push Gu Manxiu. This girl doll is white and clean, like a glutinous rice ball, unlike other girls who are thin. It seems that the original owner did take care of her very well." Gu Manxiu chuckled lightly and casually picked up the girl doll and walked into the door. "Wow, hold it high." Gao Xiaoyue clapped her hands in mid-air. Gu Manxiu ignored her and casually placed Gao Xiaoyue on the side Kong, then turned around and entered the kitchen. Gu Manxiu rummaged through her belongings and found that all the food in her family was only enough to eat for 3 days. She shook her head and said, "It seems that the life of a poor family is not easy. Give some food to cook porridge." Gu Manxiu moves all the remaining food into his own room. There are 3 skinned children in the family. They can't help but point out how they can become demons. Gu Manxiu had already calculated, and her body, which had just fallen from the water, was exhausted. She decided to lock the door and sleep. Suddenly being hit by a hard object, Gu Manxiu got up and touched a small axe on the bed. She couldn't help but be overjoyed. Isn't this her magical little axe from her past life? This axe looks ordinary, but it's actually sharp and powerless. No matter what you chop, it's a piece of cake, and it has storage function. Gu Manxiu is like a precious treasure. With it, you don't have to worry about not having enough food to eat in the future. She touched the axe and fell asleep contentedly. The sound of smashing the door was heard hazily. It was the eldest Gao Yuanshan. "Hey! You lazy woman! You only sleep all day long. Why do we and my sister only have porridge today? Did you hide all the food at home? Open the door quickly." Gao Changhe also felt that Gu Manxiu was not as good to them as before. In the past, she never let them not have enough to eat. The 2 brothers unanimously agreed that the true face of their stepmother had finally been revealed. Gu Manxiu ignored Gao Yuanshan shouting at the door and flipped over to continue sleeping. The next morning, Gu Manxiu woke up early and had just entered the hall when she saw 3 dolls sitting neatly at the table, staring at her without blinking. "Tell me. Where did you hide all the food at home?" The boss, Gao Yuanshan, was the first to make a fuss. "Yes. Hand over the grain." Second brother Gao Changhe agreed. Jiao coarsely. Although Gao Xiaoyue's speech was unclear, she also followed the agreement of her brother's milk and milk. The 3 siblings looked at Gu Manxiu without blinking their eyes. Gu Manxiu didn't feel annoyed either, but smiled calmly. "If you want to eat, you can start by working. More work pays more. If you don't work, you won't have any food to eat. I will assign work to the 3 of you later, and after you finish, you will naturally have food to eat." A flash of light in Gao Yuanshan's eyes was caught by Gu Manxiu at a glance. If anyone dares to steal food with crooked thoughts. Gu Manxiu's eyes became fierce. "Break your left hand with your left hand, break your right hand with your right hand, do you hear me?" The 3 siblings remained silent, their faces turning pale from fear. Gao Yuanshan stared at the ferocious woman in front of him and thought to himself. This woman usually never speaks loudly to them. Now, this action must have exposed her true face, no longer pretending. Gu Manxiu smiled with satisfaction, and scaring children was her best skill. It seems that the effect is good. After the lecture, Gu Manxiu asked the boss to help him cook breakfast. Unexpectedly, the stove was too hot, so it lit the firewood in the kitchen and almost burned it down. "High Far Mountain. You sincerely want to burn me to death, don't you?" After extinguishing the fire, the disheveled Gu Manxiu grabbed Gao Yuanshan's ear. "You're not allowed to have breakfast today." Gao Yuanshan glared at Gu Manxiu with resentment and stomped his feet back to the room. Gao Changhe and Gao Xiaoyue exchanged a glance and didn't dare to speak. The mother of the past never could bear to let them work. Now what's going on? Gao Yuanshan was feeling extremely hungry in his room when the door was suddenly gently opened. Gao Changhe's figure flashed in, holding 2 dry steamed buns in his hand. "Brother. Here you go." Gao Yuanshan hesitated without reaching out, just looking at Gao Changhe. "She said she wouldn't let us steal food, and if we were caught, we would be punished." "Don't worry, she didn't notice." Gao Changhe stuffed the steamed bun into Gao Yuanshan's hand and said, "Eat it quickly. If you're caught, it's not good." He didn't know that the 2 steamed buns on the stove were intentionally placed by Gu Manxiu, and he didn't stop Gao Changhe from sneaking into the kitchen. After assigning tasks to the 3 siblings, Gu Manxiu went up the mountain with an axe. It is now the end of winter season, and the mountains and fields are covered with dead branches. Gu Manxiu wants to go up the mountain to look for any remaining mature wild fruits and food. There were many wild beasts on the mountain, and Gu Manxiu used his small axe and agile skills to hunt down many prey. Gu Manxiu happily carried her prey down the mountain when a weak groan suddenly came from her ear. Startled, Gu Manxiu placed the prey aside and carefully followed the sound to find it. Pushing aside the dense bushes, I saw a person lying on the ground, with their calves entangled in a vine trap. When someone came, the man elicited a warm smile, his dark eyes shining brightly. "Great, finally someone has arrived. Please save my life, Mississippi." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Picking up a rich tenant. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Picking up a rich tenant. Gu Manxiu carefully observed and confirmed that the person dressed up by the scholar did not look like a bad person, so he stepped forward to help him untie the vine that was wrapped around his leg. "How could you, a big man, be trapped by a rabbit trap?" The man scratched his nose awkwardly and said, "Xiaoxing Jiangyichen is a student who travels around to study. He has run out of food and there are no restaurants around. He had to go up the mountain to find some food, but unexpectedly, he suffered this disaster. Thank you very much, Mississippi." Gu Manxiu didn't care and turned to leave, saying, "It's okay, be careful yourself." "Girl." Jiang Yichen called out, "I have another heartless request. Can you stay at the girl's house temporarily?" "Temporarily staying?" Gu Manxiu looked at him warily. "Isn't this person some kind of thug? Are you interested in her?" She refused at once and turned around to leave. "Miss, please stay. I just saw that this beautiful place is really a good place and I want to stay for a few more days." "Don't worry, miss, I'm not a bad person. I won't live in vain." Jiang Yichen took out an ingot of silver from his pocket and said, "Give this to the girl as room expenses." Gu Manxiu's eyes lit up, 10 taels of silver ingots. Although this person's reason may sound fake, he has given too much. Gu Manxiu's heart was full of twists and turns. The original owner was just a rural woman in the mountains and shouldn't have offended anyone. Besides, even if you want to provoke her, you have to ask her little axe. As for the residents, Gu Manxiu's eyes suddenly lit up. There was a small, dilapidated house next door to the Gao family, which was used to stack firewood and grass, and it happened to be suitable for him. "Sure, but you have to pay me for the room regularly, and you have to help me with the work." Gu Manxiu looked at him up and down, then pouted, "Let's go, just help me hold the prey." Jiang Yichen smiled and agreed, but in the moment she turned around, she restrained her smile. "It's done. Gao Yuanshan cannot stay for a long time. Instead of causing trouble in the village, he should not infiltrate the Gao family and then take action. If necessary, he can also blame this woman." Jiang Yichen narrowed his eyes, concealing the murderous intent in his eyes. When he looked up again, he had already looked like a weak scholar. Although Gu Manxiu didn't look back, he inexplicably felt a chill. "Is the weather going to change?" She looked up and urged Jiang Yichen to carry a roe deer and a rabbit on his back, rushing down the mountain. "I sold the roe deer to a tavern in the town and bought some grain, hoping to squeeze this labor force to the extreme." Jiang Yichen looked at Wen, who was weak and effortless in carrying things. Gu Manxiu was very satisfied with this free labor force. Until evening, the two of them returned home together. As soon as she entered the house, Gu Manxiu realized something was wrong. "But I saw the house in a mess, a mess." The aunt of 3 children, Zhou Miao, sat at the table with her legs crossed, eating the only remaining steamed buns. As soon as Gu Manxiu entered the house, she was scolded fiercely by Zhou Miao. "If I don't come today, my 3 nephews will probably starve to death. Look at these small faces that are all yellow and waxy, they are all thin. How do you become a mother? When the parents of the 3 children were still alive, how did you ever suffer such injustice? Indeed, none of these stepmothers are good, and they are all black-hearted." Zhou Miao looked arrogant and shouted loudly, but noticed Jiang Yichen and the full basket behind Gu Manxiu, and couldn't help but feel greedy. Her eyes rolled and she said, "Sure enough, the lowly embryo is the lowly embryo. The child's father's bones are not cold, so he found a wild man outside so quickly. You woman. Dad's filial piety period hasn't passed yet, so you want to find another man. You can only be the daughter. In law of our Gao family in this lifetime." Gao Yuanshan glared fiercely at Jiang Yichen. Gu Manxiu couldn't help but roll her eyes wide. The day before yesterday, she said she didn't want to be her stepmother. Jiang Yichen stood behind Gu Manxiu, his phoenix eyes slightly closed, his gaze piercing with icy coldness. The scene of being blood washed all over his door in his previous life is vividly remembered, but now Gao Yuanshan's gaze at him is exactly the same as in his previous life. Indeed, he is a villain from the root, and he will not let this son grow up to be a disaster in the world. Yes. We don't want a stepfather. Gao Changhe also agreed. No, no. Gao Xiaoyue also followed suit. Zhou Miao became even more proud when he saw someone speaking up and pointed at Gu Manxiu's nose, shouting angrily. You disobedient woman. When your child's father was alive, he treated you well, but now you are so unruly that you have tarnished the reputation of the Lao Gao family. It's not easy for you to take care of your child, and I don't ask for anything from you. Zhou Miao looked at the grain in Gu Manxiu's hand, with a hint of greed in his eyes. As long as you agree to leave the house clean, keep all the food you exchanged today, and take your man away, I will give up and no longer pursue you. Upon hearing this, Jiang Yichen's lips curved with a hint of mockery. With such blood relatives, no wonder they have grown into such virtues. Gu Manxiu listened quietly without getting angry, staring at Zhou Miao without blinking. Zhou Miao saw Gu Manxiu standing motionless and thought she was afraid. Her voice grew louder and she said, "Why, do you still want me to drive you away?" As he spoke, he rudely pushed Gu Manxiu towards the door. Gu Manxiu sneered and easily grabbed Zhou Miao's hands, pressing them tightly against the table next to her. Then, she took out a small axe and fiercely struck Zhou Miao's finger. With a loud bang, the table fell apart in an instant. Ah! Zhou Miao wanted to withdraw her hand, but was directly crushed by Gu Manxiu on the wall and said, "You! What are you doing?" The cold handle of the axe pressed against her throat, and the suffocation made her hair stand on end. The axe in Gu Manxiu's hand flickered with a cold light, and his mind flashed with the situation where the original owner had been bullied by Zhou Miao before. His eyes were sharp as he looked at Zhou Miao. "If you keep talking cheap, I'll cut your tongue." Despite trembling with shock, Zhou Miao, who was accustomed to being domineering, still stubbornly cursed, "I tell you, even if you kill me, you can't run away. You need to accompany me and bury me." Gu Manxiu sneered coldly, and a hint of malice flashed in her eyes. "Oh. You said that, I really want to give it a try." As she spoke, she swung her axe and slashed straight at Zhou Miao's face. Zhou Miao let out a scream of surprise, and a pool of foul-smelling urine flowed out of her pants as her body heated up. However, the axe could barely stop at the tip of her nose, teasing off a strand of broken hair from her forehead. For a moment, the room was surprisingly quiet. Gu Manxiu turned her head and looked at the three children who had already been scared and looked at her with a frightened expression on her face. Gao Yuanshan's lips trembled slightly. Gao Changhe covered his face and hid behind Gao Yuanshan, daring to secretly look at Gu Manxiu through his fingers. Gao Xiaoyue stared at Gu Manxiu with two big eyes, so scared that she forgot to cry. Gu Manxiu curved her lips and the force in her hand relaxed a bit. Zhou Miao collapsed on the ground, her eyes rolling, and she was about to pass. "Let me ask you, how is Wang Xiaoni's job in your family?" End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Gao Xiaoyue betrayed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Gao Xiaoyue betrayed. Zhou Miao was already scared out of her wits and dared not respond. She shrank and said, "My little girl works naturally and efficiently. Every day, our house is cleaned up completely." Gu Manxiu smiled coldly and turned to the three dolls, asking, "Did you hear me? Gao Yuanshan, Wang Xiaoni is 2 years younger than you. Look at how they work. Look at you all. I've only been out for a day, so it seems like I've been so kind to you all. No one is allowed to have dinner today until the house is cleaned up. Gao Yuanshan and Gao Changhe dare not make another attempt. It's time to sweep the yard and tidy up the house." Standing on the side, Jiang Yichen glanced thoughtfully at Gu Manxiu, who was fierce and evil, and curled his lips silently. There are some tricks involved. Zhou Miao dared not stay any longer. Seeing that Gu Manxiu's attention was focused on the three children, he quickly got up and ran away in a rolling motion. Seeing her aunt run away, Gao Xiaoyue finally realized and opened her mouth. She was so scared that she burst into tears. Gao Xiaoyue was so frightened by the scene just now that she cried uncontrollably. Gu Manxiu was taken aback and immediately regained her senses. Just now, She was also enraged by the series of bear children and bear parents, and looked at the little girl who was only 5 or 6 years old and knew what to do. Gu Manxiu reluctantly pursed her lips and called out to Jiang Yichen beside her, "Help me keep an eye on those 2 big ones, don't let them play around." Seeing Jiang Yichen walking out in response, she bent down and picked up the crying Gao Xiaoyue. She stiffly patted the little girl's back and forced to hum an out-of-tune nursery rhyme. "Don't cry, don't cry. As long as you're obedient, my mother won't chop you." "Oh no, I can't chop you if you're not obedient." After all, Gao Xiaoyue is just a little doll, and her impression of her parents is not that deep. She is just following her brothers to coax. She sniffed the faint aroma of soapberry on Gu Manxiu's body and gradually stopped crying. The bad stepmother is so soft, softer than both father and brother. Watching her tearful and runny little face rubbing against her clean clothes, Gu Manxiu's mouth twitched and struggled to resist the urge to throw away the little thing. Gao Xiaoyue found a comfortable position and fell asleep in Gu Manxiu's arms. Gu Manxiu pinched her crying face and helplessly wiped it clean. "Little bear, sleeping is much more adorable." Jiang Yichen sat in the yard, watching the Gao brothers with disheveled faces cleaning. Gao Yuanshan was extremely extravagant, and he would definitely not wear clothes that were not made of silk. He heard that once it was just an embroidery lady's design that was slightly crooked, so he ordered someone to cut off someone else's hand. But now, he was forced by his stepmother's lewd power, which made him look dirty and dare not resist. Looking at the remorse and trembling body on his face, Jiang Yichen's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. He changed his mind and killed him when he knew nothing about Gao Yuanshan. It was too cheap for him. Jiang Yichen's lips curved with a hint of coldness, gently caressing his fingertips. He wants Gao Yuanshan to taste all the hardships in the world and end the rest of his life in regret and remorse. Gu Manxiu carefully placed Gao Xiaoyue on the bed and gently kicked Jiang Yichen sitting on the threshold. "Go chop that table and burn it as firewood. Hurry up and buy a new one." Jiang Yichen responded with a glance and scrutinized the woman who had turned to the stove. This woman has some strength and can even chop the table into pieces. And the axe shone with golden light, it didn't seem like a mortal. It seems necessary for him to observe carefully. Gu Manxiu made rabbit and sweet potato porridge, and the fragrance quickly wafted out. 3 dolls who hadn't smelled meat for a long time were only focused on grabbing food, forgetting to insult Jiang Yichen, a traitor, not to be allowed to sit at the table. Gu Manxiu only focused on finishing his meal and ordered to finish it. The boss washed the dishes and the second wiped the table, then washed himself and returned to the room. Returning to bed, she silently stared at little Axe's hair. In her past life, she accidentally opened the storage function of the small axe, but now she has tried many methods but cannot open it. Gu Manxiu sighed for a moment, but the small axe was storing a lot of supplies. "I also know when I can start using it." After finishing his meal outside, Gao Yuanshan looked at the man next to him, his eyes flashing with a fierce look that was not suitable for his age. "You. Go wash the bowl." Gao Yuanshan placed the bowl heavily in front of Jiang Yichen. Jiang Yichen looked at the fierce child in front of him with a sinister gaze. "Just now your mother said, go wash the dishes." "Pooh. That woman is not my mother." Gao Yuanshan spat and his attitude became even worse. "Don't think that you can make a name for yourself in the Gao family if you have a good relationship with that woman. My aunt said, you are the wild man brought back by that woman. You can't even step into the Gao family." Gao Yuanshan's eyes were fierce and arrogant, and he suddenly looked up, facing the cold eyes of Jiang Yichen. Jiang Yichen raised his hand and lightly brushed his fingertips over his neck, speaking in a tone as gentle as a blade in a thin blade. "Here's a piece of advice for you. When you are still a waste, don't speak so arrogantly." Despite being a child, Gao Yuanshan instinctively discovered something. This wild man really wants to kill him. Seeing him turn his head and continue eating his own meal, Gao Yuanshan dared not stay any longer. He quickly put away his bowl and stumbled away from the table with his younger brother and sister. Jiang Yichen looked at Gao Yuanshan's fleeing figure, then at the locked door of Gu Manxiu's room, and suppressed his murderous intent in his eyes. The next morning, when Gu Manxiu woke up, she found that Gao Yuanshan and Gao Changhe had already woken up early to work. She nodded in satisfaction. I prepared breakfast for the 3 children and was about to leave, but I didn't want the village chief to surround the Zhou family with the village elders and Zhou Lan and Zhou Miao. Before Gu Manxiu could speak, he was coldly questioned by the village chief. Manxiu, a few days ago by the river, you promised to stay in the village and treat the 3 children of the Gao family well, and also promised to take care of them. Yesterday, I heard the aunt of the Gao family say, you treated his children harshly, and you changed your mind about what you agreed on. What's the explanation for this? Zhou Miao also agreed and said, yes, yes. I heard from my nephews themselves. Yesterday when I went to the Zhou family, the 3 children were so hungry that they cried and their faces were waxen yellow. It made me feel heartbroken. Just as Gu Manxiu was about to explain, she saw Gao Yuanshan quietly winking at Gao Xiaoyue. The corner of her mouth twitched as she looked at her. This little brat Gao Xiaoyue looked at her brother in confusion and reluctantly pouted. But Gao Yuanshan gave her a fierce glare and pinched her little buttocks with great determination. Gao Xiaoyue screamed in pain. Gao Yuanshan gritted his teeth and his eyes turned red in an instant. This woman didn't let us eat yesterday, and even instructed us to do rough work. She said we couldn't eat well, and we were hungry and powerless. She punished us when she saw that we didn't work efficiently. Zhou Miao pretended to be heartbroken and hugged 3 dolls, crying loudly, poor little ones. It's also because of your unfortunate fate that you have such a wicked stepmother. This wicked woman doesn't give the dolls food, or I let them eat at my house. Village chief, please give me a review. How could you treat your dolls like this? End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Tenant becomes a teacher. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Tenant becomes a teacher. The village chief looked at the 3 white and pure dolls, feeling a bit puzzled, but still asked, Gao's wife, is what his aunt said true? Gu Manxiu ignored the village chief's words and instead looked expressionlessly at Zhou Lan and Zhou Miao, who were crying uncontrollably. Zhou Miao, who was originally pretending to cry, saw Gu Manxiu's sharp gaze and her crying gradually subsided. The 3 children also hid in the arms of their second aunt Zhou Lan and dared not look at her. That's all for now, I don't want to say anything more. Village chief, what do you want to do? Just give me a fair word. Before the village chief could speak, Zhou Lan took the lead. If you ask me, it's better to leave all the food stored in Lao Gao's house with us, so that we can distribute the food for the dolls. This way, we won't starve the children, and also to prevent this woman from starving her own dolls to death due to her bad intentions. Are you having a bad heart? Maybe there's someone else, right? Gu Manxiu's eyes kept staring at Zhou Miao, who felt a pang of guilt as she stared at her. What do you think I'm doing? Do you think I have ulterior motives towards the Gao family? You recognized it yourself, I didn't say it. You. Zhou Miao gritted his teeth and looked at Gu Manxiu. This woman is too bad. Surprisingly tricked her. What's going on when those 3 dolls say you don't give them food? Gu Manxiu looked coldly at Gao Yuanshan, whose eyes were filled with pride, and her heart was filled with disappointment. She is indeed an immature white-eyed wolf, and if these 3 little ones bite and accuse her, she will not be able to clear her name. She was about to ask to leave the village when Gao Xiaoyue choked up and said, yesterday, Yeye ate meat. It smells so delicious. Gao Yuanshan quickly tugged at her clothes to stop her sister from speaking, but Gao Xiaoyue pouted and continued, my stepmother gave us meat, and my aunt only gave Yeye pickled vegetables. She's not a little fool, following her fragrant and soft stepmother to have meat to eat. After hearing this, everyone envied and said, "Do they still have meat to eat at home?" A murmur broke out in the crowd. It seems that the daughter-in-law of the Gao family has never mistreated the children. Who said it's not right? I saw Gao's wife go hunting in the mountains yesterday, so I think she must be hunting wild animals for her child in exchange for food. Gu Manxiu glanced at Gao Xiaoyue with some surprise and then looked at the panicked Zhou Miao. Zhou Miao's face turned pale. She had intended to take advantage of the opportunity to seize the Zhou family's grain for herself, but she didn't expect that stealing chickens would not erode the rice. This woman is too cunning. Surprisingly, he quickly instigated that girl named Gao Xiaoyue to rebel. Zhou Lan beside her looked at Zhou Miao with a hint of silence. She was so stupid. I don't even know that I was taken into a pit by someone else. The village chief's face couldn't bear to hang. He didn't want to get caught up in the grudges and grievances of the Gao family. Aunt Zhou, I know you feel sorry for your 3 children from the Gao family, but you can't just listen to the wind and rain. As you can see, the Gao family's daughter-in-law keeps the children clean and tidy. There's nothing wrong with them. This is your family matter, and I won't be able to intervene. In front of the children, don't let the 2 families get too into a stalemate. Let's just let today's matter go. But she has a bad character. Zhou Lan suddenly stood up and pointed at Gu Manxiu. Don't forget, she brought a man home yesterday. Not long after the father of the Gao family's child passed away, she openly brought a bachelor to the Gao family. Isn't this ruining the reputation of the Gao family? What? Everyone was shocked and their gaze suddenly shifted to Jiang Yichen. Faced with the questioning gaze of the crowd, Jiang Yichen remained calm and composed. Sorry everyone, I have exhausted all my resources and have been trapped in a trap. If it weren't for Miss Gu's righteous rescue, I would probably have died. His face showed a hint of sadness perfectly. My body was weak, so Miss Gu kindly took me into the woodshed to rest. If I ruin Miss Gu's reputation, then I really feel sorry. The village chief's face showed a hesitant expression and said, but after all, you are an outsider. It's not appropriate for you to stay here. Jiang Yichen curled her lips and said, then please ask the village chief to arrange it for me. I have been studying for a few years, and if I don't mind, I can teach the children to study here. In the future, I can also help support some of the village by obtaining official positions. Teaching. The village chief's eyes lit up instantly, a scholar. The village has not produced a scholar yet, so it has been laughed at by the neighboring village for several years. And the children have learned to read, so they won't suffer from being illiterate in the future. The village chief approached Jiang Yichen with a smile on his face. My child, I misunderstood you before. Since you have a pure background, why don't you stay in the village to teach the children and have a place to settle down? You don't have to worry about the salary, I'm sure you won't be treated unfairly. As long as it can make the village proud and proud from now on, the village chief doesn't care whether the Zhou family's wife and this man have any sexual relations. The villagers all looked happy, but Gu Manxiu frowned slightly. Isn't this person talking about studying abroad? Why should they stay here? Jiang Yichen caught a glimpse of Gu Manxiu's inquiring expression. He furrowed his brows and eyes, curled his lips and chuckled lightly, then. I'll bother Miss Gu. Seeing him act honestly, Gu Manxiu suppressed his doubts and politely responded, no trouble. I don't know where the village chief wants to set up this school. Ah, this. The village chief suddenly faced difficulties. This family had no surplus food, and who could spare a room? Jiang Yichen smiled and said, the firewood house I live in now is also quite spacious. Why don't we renovate it and open a window to make it a school? The village chief immediately smiled and said, it's so perfect. In this way, it's also convenient for those 2 boys from the Gao family to study. Speaking of which, Gu Manxiu couldn't refuse either and could only accept it. Zhou Miao and Zhou Lan on the side didn't expect things to be covered up like this, and they were a bit unwilling. Village chief, if you put them together, aren't you afraid they'll hook up together from now on? The village chief immediately changed his face and said, enough. You have repeatedly accused Mr. Jiang and the Gao family's wife of promiscuity before. Mr. Jiang's ability to stay in the village and teach without any previous grievances has given you a lot of face. What else do you two want? But Zhou Miao wanted to say more, but was pulled by Zhou Lan and left the Gao family in defiance. A stone fell to the ground in the village chief's heart, and after discussing the specific matters of the school with Jiang Yichen, he left with his people. After the village chief left, Gu Manxiu glanced at Jiang Yichen, who was calm and composed, and spoke softly, then I'll entrust you with my 2 little boys, but I'll still collect your rent. Jiang Yichen was taken aback and then chuckled softly, naturally. His gaze fell calmly on Gao Yuanshan, who had widened his eyes in dissatisfaction, with a cold smile in his eyes. The day ahead is long. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Who is being unreasonable? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Who is being unreasonable? The news of the village chief ordering the construction of a school quickly spread in the village, and many people came to seek an opportunity for their own children. Gu Manxiu also clearly stated the price: as long as he contributed money to the construction of the school, the child's tuition fee would be halved. As a result, the number of applicants continues to increase, and the construction of the school is just around the corner. Early that morning, just as dawn broke, Gu Manxiu was getting up to make breakfast for his 3 children when a shout came from the outside door. Manxiu! Manxiu! It's me! Hurry up and open the door for me. Zhou Miao's voice. Gu Manxiu's delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly. What is she doing this morning? The wind and snow were gusting, and the cold was piercing. Gu Manxiu wrapped herself in her big coat and struggled to walk to the door. When I opened the door, I saw Zhou Miao wrapped in zongzi outside the house. Her face was flushed by the cold wind, and her body and bones were shaking, but her mental outlook was better than ever. As soon as the door opened, she ran into Gu Manxiu and walked straight through the courtyard towards the inside of the house. She sat down rudely at the charcoal basin in the house and began to remove her heating equipment. She could not help roast, "It's really cold for me this day." The wet jacket was thrown onto the bed, soaking a large area. Gu Manxiu picked up her clothes and placed them on a nearby shelf. "The child is still sleeping in bed," she said. "Oh my, it's my carelessness." Zhou Miao chuckled, "It's so cold outside today, you should pay attention to keeping warm." Gu Manxiu lazily lifted her eyelids and said, "Who made you come early?" "I'm excited to hear the news." Zhou Miao patted his thigh. "Manxiu. How are you preparing for the school?" "Almost done." Gu Manxiu walked towards the kitchen and casually replied. Almost all the people with children in the village came to help build the school, except Zhou Miao and Zhou Lan, the 2 sisters. "It's not a good thing to come to your door with a straight face now. There are not many ingredients. Make purple rice porridge for the children." Zhou Miao followed them to the kitchen and said, "Since we're almost done, can we reserve a spot for the 2 sons of the Wang family when school starts?" "Where is it located?" Gu Manxiu calmly took out a handful of purple rice and carefully cleaned it in a basin. Zhou Miao sked and leaned against the island platform with a round and rolling body, as if afraid that she wouldn't be able to see through. He simply said, "Of course there are spots for admission." On her chubby and rustic face, she was meticulous in her calculations. "You're not mistaken, are you?" Gu Manxiu laughed out loud. "As I said before, leaving a spot requires working and paying for the school." "What are you saying?" Zhou Miao's face collapsed. "We still need to talk about this between us." Gu Manxiu stopped his movements and returned with a serious tone, "I approach anyone with a business-oriented attitude. The kitchen without the sound of water is a game between the eyes of 2 women." The cold wind outside the window stirred the already loose window, and a few gusts of cold air poured in, freezing the air. Zhou Miao stared hard, but in the end, unable to get angry, he simply stepped forward and forcefully pulled the basin in Gu Manxiu's hand, throwing it to the ground. Okay, you Gu Manxiu, your wings are hard now, aren't you? Looking at the fallen grain, Gu Manxiu's heart was dripping with blood. Her face, which originally had a slight smile, turned black. Her pitch-black eyes accurately fell on Zhou Miao, and her tone was cold. Oh, you're not polite now, she said, are you being polite to me? And what about you? Zhou Miao kicked the basin with a strong sense of displeasure. Isn't it just about leaving a spot for our two young boys, so we can take your life? Zhou Miao leaned over and said, you're not unaware of our family's situation. Where can we afford to read to our children? Since you don't have money, don't read it. Gu Manxiu was also very clear about her attitude. Unexpectedly, Zhou Miao suddenly squatted on the ground and began to cry loudly, you can also be considered an elder of two children. Why are you unwilling to help with such a small favor? Business is business. Gu Manxiu remained unmoved. If everyone were to build relationships with me, wouldn't I be too busy? How could you be so ruthless? Zhou Miao pretended to wipe away her tears, if I had known you were such a white-eyed wolf, I wouldn't have let my struggling younger brother marry you in death. I am their aunt, but I also have to pay, otherwise it will be unfair to others. What's so fair and unfair about this? You just don't want our two children from the Wang family to go to school. Zhou Miao pointed fiercely at her. Our two excellent children from the Wang family might even become the top scorers. You buried them like this. Don't worry. Gu Manxiu watched her awkward acting with a cold eye, you can't even bury me. It's because you don't want to send them to school. Our family doesn't have money. I want you to help me. If I become the top scorer in the future, I will definitely repay you. You just don't want to see the prosperity of our Wang family, do you? What a wicked woman. There's no need to put such a big hat on my head, Gu Manxiu said, holding a basin preparing to walk out, so are you not ready to help with this busy task? Zhou Miao asked. Gu Manxiu rolled her eyes up to the sky. If possible, she really wants to beat up the woman in front of her now. She finally turned around and solemnly announced, I said, if you want to come, just pay. Zhou Miao saw that no matter how hard he tried, he immediately changed his attitude and got up from the ground, with his nose raised to the sky. What a broken school. It's okay if our child doesn't go to school, he said, not going up is the best. What can a child from a strange family make a name for themselves? It's better not to come to the school to tarnish the holy learning atmosphere. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Unscrupulous Things. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Unscrupulous Things. Gu Manxiu walked out of the kitchen, feeling no longer in the mood to cook breakfast properly. She planned to have a few children filial to her later and cook food for her. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked out of the kitchen, Gao Yuanshan's angry face met him. How could you do this? How am I doing? Gu Manxiu's fearless gaze towards the child made Gao Yuanshan grit his teeth even more with his lazy appearance. Gao Yuanshan looked through her and pointed to the position behind her, how could you treat your aunt like this? Gu Manxiu's lips curved with a sarcastic smile, you're talking about that leprous dog. Looking sideways behind me, the mangy dog is sitting on the ground crying. Upon hearing this title, Zhou Miao became even more infuriated and said, I was really blind back then. I didn't expect you to be such a person. Her dark face revealed a blush of embarrassment and anger, as she climbed up from the ground and approached Gu Manxiu with a fierce aura. How could there be such a vicious woman like you? Gao Yuanshan spoke up, clenched his fists, and his hatred erupted. She was originally the murderer of my father. Zhou Miao was filled with righteous indignation and pulled Gao Yuanshan to tears, this kind of woman, she doesn't even support you. How dare you give her the child? Gao Yuanshan was buried in Zhou Miao's arms, crying out all his grievances, "She's not my mother." Gu Manxiu watched as the two of them sang and reconciled, just holding their arms and standing aside, staring coolly at Gao Yuanshan. "Yes, I'm malicious, so don't even go to school," she said. "I can definitely get the money I gave to the school back for my own use," she spread out as if it really didn't matter. "It's really not appropriate to spend it on you." At this moment, Gao Changhe, who woke up at some point, walked over and became anxious upon hearing these words. "Don't. Me." Gu Manxiu shrugged off Gao Changhe's hand and said, "Your older brother and aunt think they are more capable of supporting you, so you can go with them." Upon hearing this, Zhou Miao became anxious and said, "If you want us to raise a child, you have to give me these houses." This was originally intended to be left for Gu Manxiu, the 3 children of the Gao family. Now she has proposed not to have children herself, which is just convenient for Zhou Miao's plan. It is natural to categorize the house under one's own name. Why not be a beautiful thing? "You have a beautiful idea," Gu Manxiu shook her head. "No matter who will raise the child, the house can only be mine." Zhou Miao's eyelids twitched as he pushed away Gao Yuanshan, who was buried in his arms, and he said, "Children. Look at you, this mother. You are so vicious." Gu Manxiu took a steamed bun from the table and slowly nibbled on it. "So what? You mercifully took it away. I'm not a problem either." "What do you mean? How dare you drive us away?" Gao Changhe couldn't believe it. Gu Manxiu nodded nonchalantly and said, "Anyway, you think I'm not your mother either. From now on, I will start my school and earn my money. You can follow my aunt and ask her to help you pay for school. Do you understand?" After a conversation, the 3 people across the street were momentarily stunned. But it is obvious that Gu Manxiu's attitude towards whether or not to support them is really optional. "My mother used to obey them obediently, why has it become like this now?" Gao Yuanshan could never compromise in front of this woman. "Okay. Then let's go live at my aunt's house from today on. I am very happy. She lives more comfortably alone. Look at this mess." Zhou Miao saw that the situation was not good, so he quickly withdrew and left. "My doll is still waiting for dinner, so I'll leave first." Gu Manxiu sincerely called out, "Don't leave, the 3 children are still waiting for you to take away. They can live better with you." "Gao Changhe, Gao Yuanshan, what are you still waiting for? Your good aunt is about to leave, don't chase after her and beg her to take care of you. What are you joking about?" Zhou Miao scolded coldly, "You are the daughter-in-law of the Gao family. It is only natural for you to raise children for them. What's the point of giving them to me?" Gu Manxiu squinted her eyes and didn't want to step down for the other person. "But you keep saying, you're more suitable for raising these 3 children than me. That's not suitable at all." Zhou Miao began to put on his big coat, indicating a clear escape. "I'll go home first. You must help me with the school matter, Manxiu. Are you shameless about wanting to have sex for free?" The smile on Gu Manxiu's lips was like the cold wind outside, chilling into her heart. Although I knew from the beginning that Zhou Miao was not a good person, I felt nauseous and really didn't have anything to say. As soon as Zhou Miao left home, Gao Yuanshan jumped out first and said, "What did you mean earlier?" "What do I mean?" Gu Manxiu just put down the steamed bun in his hand. "Did you understand just now?" A person like a young adult walked up to her and angrily lifted the steamed bun she had just put down. He slammed the table and said, "You don't want us to take over the house. Evil woman." The ceramic tea cup on the table bounced up with tremendous force and made a crisp sound when it fell. "This house was originally mine," Gu Manxiu said. "I'm just telling the truth. I don't think I'm good, so I'll go straight to your aunt's house. I don't ask you to stay with me either. It's annoying to see each other, okay?" Gao Changhe clearly had never seen this scene before, and walked up to Gao Yuanshan as if frightened. He tugged at his clothes and stammered, "Brother, don't leave." "I won't leave," Gao Yuanshan's sharp gaze fixed firmly on Gu Manxiu. "I want this woman to pay the price. He killed our father, making it difficult for us to live well. I can't let her go." Although the two of them had restrained their voices, they couldn't help but hear Gu Manxiu say, "Okay, I don't want to leave. Now get out of here and take a stand." "It's snowing outside," said Gao Changhe with a loud voice. "The north wind is howling, and heavy snow is falling. The house is covered with layers of white, and the ice pillars on the eaves are distinct and sturdy. The ground area is covered in snow, with 3 corpses deep. So who made you lift my steamed bun?" Gu Manxiu, with an iron face and selflessness, wasting food is the most shameful. She lightly tapped her slender jade fingers and said, "Just forget about Gao Changhe and clean up the overturned purple rice in the kitchen. Gao Yuanshan, stand outside as punishment, come back in 2 hours. 2 hours. People can turn into ice sculptures outside." Gao Changhe's eyes turned red in anger and said, "Brother, hurry up and take some medicine. It's so cold outside, you can't go." Gao Yuanshan just stood in place and looked at Gu Manxiu, gritting his teeth tightly and refusing to let go. Stubborn like a donkey. For a long time, with clear handwriting, he gritted his teeth and announced, "Go, go." "Can't go, brother." Gao Changhe jumped in front of Gu Manxiu. "Mother, brother knows he's wrong, you can't punish him." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Ice and Snow Penalty Station. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Ice and Snow Penalty Station. Gu Manxiu possessed the body of Bao Qingtian, and no matter how much Gao Changhe pleaded, she would not let go. Gao Yuanshan is the child who hates him the most among the 3 of them, and he must work harder to force out the reason for his hatred. Perhaps this incident is a good turning point. She just deliberately opposed Zhou Miao to make Gao Yuanshan explode. Only then can she have the opportunity to reason with Gao Yuanshan. Gu Manxiu stood up and walked towards the collapse. "Then you can go." A big lazy waist stretched out, and drowsiness crawled onto his head again. Gao Changhe burst into tears and said, "Gu Manxiu, you're going to kill him like this? Such a severe cold, even strong men may not be able to withstand it, and they do not have clothes to keep warm. Isn't Gao Yuanshan going out to die in vain? That's his own choice." Gu Manxiu narrowed her eyes. She wants to teach Gu Yuanshan how to make her own choices and must accept them. Including the previous incident of pushing Gu Manxiu down the river, she also needs to teach this child well. A spoiled boy is not easy to break and turn his bones. We need to take it step by step slowly. Gao Xiaoyue didn't know when she was awakened, and the peaceful room was suddenly filled with crying, "Brother, don't go out and get cold. Brother, it's okay." Gao Yuanshan's forehead showed bulging veins, indicating extreme suppression. "You'll be able to see me soon. Mother, can we not let our brother go out? It's really cold outside." The soft and glutinous little girl, dressed in a red robe, obediently rushed up to her and reached out to do a lifting gesture. "I even made the wrong gesture." Gu Manxiu squatted down and hugged the cute Xiaomi Tuanzi in her arms. She sat with her on her lap and together sat on the bed. "Xiaoyue, this matter was chosen by my brother," she said. "He wasted food and should be punished. Change to a lighter one." Gao Xiaoyue's sleepy cheeks were still tinged with drowsiness. "Brother will freeze to death." "Freeze damaged. Then let's talk about freezing damaged." When Gao Yuanshan heard these words, his suppressed emotions reached their peak. He resolutely walked to the door, fearlessly dying like a soldier. "No need to say, I'll go out by myself." Upon seeing this, Gu Manxiu sneered and said, 3 little brats, they still act like they're going through life and death." At the moment the door opened, a cold wind poured in and gently kissed everyone's cheeks, causing pain. Gao Yuanshan went out to stand for punishment. At the moment the door closed, Gao Xiaoyue's tears broke the thread and fell wildly. Finally, she rolled into her cotton jacket without a trace, sobbing and saying, "Brother." Gao Changhe became angry and walked up to Gu Manxiu, tearing and roaring angrily, "Do you really have a heart?" "Of course I do," Gu Manxiu responded lightly, "but it's not at this time." "It's clear that he wanted to kill my heart," she continued to fight back. "Can't I still retaliate?" "Then you can't let him go out and get cold either. So I deserve to drown once." Gu Manxiu's eyes turned cold, as if Gao Changhe was also in the midst of ice and snow. "Remember, I won't spoil you as much as before. Because Gu Manxiu, who used to be easy to bully, has already died. Now she needs to correct these mistakes step by step." Gu Manxiu's tone was emotionless. "Now, it's time for you to do your punishment. The reason is to shout at your elders." After all the people who should be punished had left, she looked at the little girl in her arms and said, "Xiaoyue, are you still tired?" "I'm not tired." Gao Xiaoyue's rebellious factor also came into play, "You're the culprit who killed my brother and father. I don't want to be in the same bed as you. Your brother hasn't died yet." Gu Manxiu opened the quilt in front of her and said, "Whatever, I'm sleeping." Gao Xiaoyue looked at the thin and weak figure of the person, and even more so, she didn't hit a single spot. How could this bad woman mistreat their 3 siblings so badly? After a long time, she stared at the quilt covered by Gu Manxiu and thought to herself. My small body stood up with a grunt, jumped under the bed, and pulled the tail of the blanket down with force. The heavy quilt fell down from the sky and covered the little doll's face. How come the surroundings have become pitch black? She began to struggle recklessly, struggling to crawl and fight in the trap of the quilt, but how could she get out? Woo 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 woo. Help. The low sobs gradually turned into wailing, waking up Gu Manxiu from her sleep. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and sat up, only to see a blanket lying on the dirty floor, which was the one she had built. A small arch in the center of the blanket was crying. Sigh. With a subtle sigh, she stood up and walked to the arch, grabbed a corner, and lifted it with force. "Hey." The girl, who was originally crying like a madman, curiously widened her eyes. Her crimson eyes were instantly lovable, and her eyelashes, wet with tears, were dancing in confusion. Who helped her? There is no one else in the room either. Definitely not a bad woman who is still sleeping in bed. The little girl was still able to distinguish between priorities, carrying the blanket and slowly walking outside. She used all her strength to suckle and opened the door, which was shaken by the cold wind outside. The little bun's face bulged and he said, "Send the blanket to my brother." Brother. Stepping down the steps with enthusiasm, every step she made in the snow was a blood-thick affection. When he walked up to the person, Gao Yuanshan's lips had turned white from the cold, and his face was devoid of blood. He seemed to blend in with the white mountains and fields behind him, unable to even tremble, just standing stiffly. My whole body was covered in snow, and my hair was starting to freeze. Gao Xiaoyue's teeth trembled up and down, and she couldn't help but complain, "This woman is really bad. How did you come out?" Gao Yuanshan's reaction didn't freeze, and as he looked down at Gao Xiaoyue, his eyes immediately turned red. "Did that woman allow you?" "She's asleep. So I didn't know I came out to find her brother." The little girl's red face was filled with a proud expression, "Brother. Hurry up, cover the blanket, and after covering it, it won't be cold." "How did you resist?" Gao Yuanshan couldn't help but laugh and cry, his inner emotions almost filled his whole body, warming him up. It surprised me so much. Hurry up, brother. You're really going to become a snowman soon. In the ice and snow, the feelings of brothers and sisters have been further sublimated. At the moment when he put on the blanket, Gao Yuanshan swore, "I will definitely drive this stinky woman out of our house and give you a better life." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Malicious Stepmother. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 9. Malicious Stepmother. When Gao Yuanshan finished his punishment and returned to the house, the three little ghosts instantly huddled together. Although Gao Yuanshan was protected by a cotton quilt, he was also heavily frozen, trembling all over. However, he still squeezed out a smile to comfort the two little ones. Don't cry for now. Gao Xiaoyue took Gao Yuanshan's hand and walked towards the charcoal stove. Brother, go over there and keep warm. My brother's warm and powerful palm was now like an ice cream, directly freezing into her heart. Gao Changhe kicked the chair next to him, his heroic face full of displeasure. It's really too much. Hurry up and kick her out. Thinking of the tragic scene where he was picking up every grain of rice in the leaky kitchen without any heating tools, Gao Changhe's anger towards Gu Manxiu gradually rose. Gao Yuanshan shook his head abnormally and said, I can't do it for now. Don't you drive away the bad woman. Gao Xiaoyue's pink face was bewildered and ignorant. Gao Changhe's eyes were wide open in anger, and his volume surged up to the roof. Did your brain freeze? She treated us like this, how could you still? In her hand, it was our house deed and land deed. When my father died, he gave everything to her. Gao Yuanshan's mind was not frozen, but completely clear. Even now our food is under her control. The frost on Gao Yuanshan's eyelashes melted into water under the scorching charcoal fire, falling down like tears. If we just kick her out, who are you saying is the one who suffered losses? The three little ghosts looked at each other in silence. No one said another word. I understand. Gao Changhe broke the deadlock. We need to take everything from her hands first before we can drive her away. I don't want to live in the same room as a bad woman. Gao Xiaoyue couldn't understand, she only knew that her brother was cold. Drive her away. Don't want her. Brother, don't want her. Speaking, he still coquettishly crawled into the embrace of Gao Yuanshan. Xiaoyue, don't worry about this matter for now. Gao Yuanshan watched Xiao Bai Tuanzi seriously, placing his hands on her shoulders and solemnly saying, my second brother and I will solve everything. Never let this vicious woman harm us. Gao Yuanshan silently swore in his heart. The sound of knocking spread at the door, and Gao Yuanshan went to open the door. Outside in the icy snow, a young man dressed in a navy blue mink coat stood at the door, blending with the white snow behind him, exuding an irresistible aura of luxury. He is like snow, gentle and indifferent. The young man gathered up his coat and, when he came into contact with Gao Yuanshan's face, a moment of coldness flashed. However, he immediately returned to normal with a gentle smile and said, Excuse me, is Miss Gu at home? No, Gu Yuanshan didn't like the man Gu Manxiu casually picked up. What's up with you? I'm looking for her to ask about lunch. Jiang Yichen had a friendly attitude, and the wind and snow outside the window blew his hair at the end, but it didn't look messy. Instead, it had a bit more radiance. How are you going to solve it? Gao Yuanshan was indeed stumped by this question. Gu Manxiu has never seen anyone since punishing him. Jiang Yichen saw the child's embarrassment and said, Do you also have nowhere to eat? Gao Changhe ran over. Jiang Yichen burst into laughter and said, Is your mother here? Ask her for food. Gao Changhe gave the latter a disdain, she only looks at money. Jiang Yichen raised an eyebrow in disbelief and said, How can I say this? How can such a stingy person cultivate a high altitude and extravagant character like the land? In my past life, I was able to buy 10 pieces of land in one go. If you don't believe it, go call yourself. Gao Yuanshan asked to open the door. She's sleeping over there. It's not appropriate. Jiang Yichen shook his head and rejected it. Even in the midst of wind and snow outside, he remained motionless. As a man, I cannot casually enter a woman's room. Then you're hungry. Gao Xiaoyue made a face and ran back to the room with a thud. Gu Manxiu was still hugging the beautiful man in her sleep, and a faint sound penetrated her ears, causing her a headache. Who disturbed her Qin Meng in the early morning? Have you eaten too many spicy eggs? She sat up from the bed in displeasure, rubbing her fishy and loose sleeping eyes, disheveled hair, disheveled clothes, wrinkled her delicate face, and vented her anger, saying, "What's the noise? I don't know if someone is sleeping." The sound spread throughout half of the village. Did Miss Gu wake up? Jiang Yichen's full lips raised a smile, revealing pure white teeth, and shouted loudly through the door. "Why don't you come in by yourself?" Gao Changhe didn't understand what he was insisting on. Perhaps even readers with mental illnesses like to freeze themselves outside. Gao Yuanshan was the fastest to go and call someone. He fearlessly faced Manxiu's gaze of death and said, "Someone called you." The latter's gaze was like an invisible blade, "Who wants to die so much? Then let him face the strong wind." She moved her buttocks forward, propped up the bed with strength, put on her shoes, and walked towards the door. The man outside stood tall and elegant, with a light blue robe that accentuated his snowy skin. Gu Manxiu's raging flames were extinguished by beauty, and she was truly stunned. After a moment of confusion, she raised her eyebrows and asked, "Why are you here?" Jiang Yichen gave a faint smile. Even though she was embarrassed, she still maintained her demeanor. "Miss Gu, I'm not talented. May I ask if there is any food available?" "No more food to eat." Gu Manxiu glanced outside. The cold was terrifying, the vegetable cellar didn't go out, and there were no extra ingredients in the dilapidated house next door. "I guess I was really at a loss, so I thought about coming over to argue." Jiang Yichen said, "Could you please help me, Mississippi?" His eyes were bright, and he looked at Gu Manxiu with deep affection. "Don't look at me like that." Gu Manxiu felt a chill all over her body. "Give me the money. Otherwise, there won't be anything to eat." Jiang Yichen remembered the descriptions of those children just now, and what she saw with her own eyes was somewhat cute. "I won't treat the girl unfairly," he said elegantly as he took out an ingot of silver from his pocket. "Miss Gu, just accept it." The pitch-black pupils accurately landed on the silver, as it was held in the man's arms, and she still felt a little warm when she took it. Jiang Yichen, seeing her standing still without any movement, curiously turned his head and asked, "What's wrong? Do you think the silver is not enough?" "It's not that interesting." Gu Manxiu stepped aside and said, "Come in and take you to get some food." The second she turned around to accept the silver, her face turned cold. This person's identity and origin are unknown, as they can easily throw away $1,000. Gao Xiaoyue explored her head and seemed to want to follow her, but was discovered by Gu Manxiu and repelled with her eyes. She pursed her lips and said, "So what are we eating?" "I'm hungry," Gu Man replied calmly with both hands in her pockets. "I'm not happy today. I didn't plan to give you anything to eat." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Standing and Speaking Without Backache. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Standing and Speaking Without Backache, what do you mean? Gao Changhe was irritable and slammed the table upon hearing the words. "We're going to starve to death, right?" Gu Manxiu turned her head, her thin eyelids showing blood vessels stained with serum. "I forgot to tell you the rules. Provoke me once, go hungry for a day." "You," said Gao Changhe, holding his fist and having nowhere to vent his anger, "disagree." Gu Manxiu, who had already been scolded thousands of times, responded lightly, "Go find your aunt." "Miss Gu's tutoring is extraordinary," Jiang Yichen said with a condescending tone as he followed the people to get the grain. Gu Manxiu played with the silver in his hand and said, "Don't agree. Then you go raise it." "She still finds these 3 dragging oil bottles troublesome. I have the ability to take care of it. Talking while standing doesn't hurt your back." "Girl's child, I am an outsider. I'm not familiar with them either," Gu Manxiu interrupted, raising his hand. "It's just a stepmother who has no blood relationship as a tool person. Jiang Yichen frowned and said, a tool man. Are you looking at the candlestick under the candle? She murmured, it's useless and needs to be burned. That's the tool man. Jiang Yichen smiled and said, I understand. Once you understand, take it quickly. Gu Manxiu wished she could kick the Qianmian man's butt. Standing at the door of my granary, thinking about emptying it, right. Jiang Yichen couldn't help but cry and laugh, quickly selecting something she loved to eat from inside and returning. Seeing someone come out, the three children exchanged eyes, and Gao Xiaoyue rushed forward to embrace Jiang Yichen's thigh. She sat down on the expensive cotton shoes and groaned softly, Xiaoyue also wants to eat. Gao Chanhe also ran forward and tugged at Jiang Yichen's hem, so what, can you share some of your food with us? We're so hungry. He is completely different from the little tyrant at the door just now. Jiang Yichen looked at his descendants in embarrassment and said, this. One person has one leg, he can't even take a step. Gao Yuanshan finally appeared with tears in his eyes, almost kneeling and kowtowing, our three siblings are really hungry. Can you give us some? Jiang Yichen struggled with his steps, and his delicate face rarely showed embarrassment. Didn't Miss Gu give you something to eat? On the contrary, the stepmother, who should have blamed herself for abusing her child, is now applauding and saying, you did a good job. Don't look at me. Keep acting, if you act well, maybe they'll give you a bite to eat. Miss Gu, please don't make things difficult for me, Jiang Yichen said with a helpless look in her eyes. Hungry, rice, said Gao Xiaoyue with eager eyes, I also want to give you. Gu Manxiu ignored it and walked forward. After a long time, a sentence came from the front, then give it to me. So, what was supposed to be a 1.1 delicacy has now turned into a chaotic stew of 5 people. The fragrant hot pot boiled vigorously, with small bubbles popping up on everyone's hearts. A warm room ravages the cold winter. Gao Xiaoyue tried to be cute while eating, and her face turned pink and tender due to the heat, making her exceptionally cute. When we have money, we will definitely treat you to dinner, Gao Chanhe grinned as he ate. Gu Manxiu kicked Gao Yuanshan without saying a word and said, what about you? You're not showing anything. Thank you. Gao Yuanshan felt from his heart that the young man's attitude towards him was not kind, so he didn't have much good temper. No one noticed that when those 2 words came out, Jiang Yichen's eyes were filled with mockery. What is this for? Zhou Lan and Zhou Miao's voice appeared outside the door, and the 2 of them rudely pushed the door in. It's so fragrant that I smelled it right at the door. Gu Manxiu sat in her own seat, coldly looking up and saying, what's up with you? I just came this morning, what kind of demon are you doing now? Zhou Lan walked up to the dining table with a smile on her face and looked at the others. Sister, you just told me when you went back that we must register for this school, she said, so what? Gu Manxiu reached out directly, where's the money? Zhou Lanjian stood still, his expression a bit uneasy, and he could only touch his hand a few times. It's so ugly, Manxiu, he said, no money. Gu Manxiu didn't show any face. Then go out and turn right. Why should you treat me to a few bites? Zhou Miao walked up and said, we've been running all the way in the face of such a blizzard and haven't had lunch yet. Gu Manxiu put down her chopsticks and let out a loud voice, did I let you come? Why can't we all come now? Zhou Miao felt embarrassed and angry in public, you're really losing what a daughter-in-law should look like now. Gu Manxiu nodded and said, yes, do you have anything else to do? If you don't have money and still come knocking on your door, isn't that purely seeking criticism? We came to ask you to leave a spot for the children of our 2 families, Zhou Lan replied. The children of our 2 families are both very smart. Gu Manxiu chuckled and said, what's my business? It's not my son. Why are you so impolite? Zhou Miao crossed his waist with both hands, I begged you in a good voice in the morning. Can you give me this whole mess now? What's the use of having you as our daughter-in-law? If it's useless, then let me go. Gu Manxiu kept saying those few words back and forth, and his mouth became annoyed. Here you are, kid. You're making trouble for no reason. Aren't you also making trouble for no reason? Gu Manxiu wrapped his hands around his chest and said coldly, you must go through the back door, right? Okay, then you don't need to pay for the school, just sign up with the money. Zhou Miao was so angry that his two nostrils kept contracting. I've never seen something as ruthless as you. So you see it now. Are you satisfied? Gu Manxiu was too lazy to argue with them. The door is over there. Far mountain. Long river. Little moon. Look, this is your mother. You are so ruthless that our child has no books to read and our excellent child is not allowed to go to Beijing to take the exam. This is your mother shouting and screaming one by one. The three young children of the Gao family silently bury their heads in cooking. They're not stupid. If they go through this muddy water, they might run out of food tomorrow. Are you the teacher? Zhou Lan walked up to Jiang Yichen, grabbed his hand, and knelt down crying. I know you are all kind-hearted bodhisattvas, unlike that malicious woman. You should have taken my child kindly. They are really smart. Jiang Yichen withdrew his hand without a trace and said, Sister, it's not that I didn't help, but the rules are there. I can't break it for anyone without reason. Zhou Miao nodded and said fiercely, all right. You all collude well, but you don't want my child to study. Gu Manxiu urged, yes, that's it. Then hurry up and don't disturb our meal. Don't feel like eating today. Zhou Miao raised his hand and directly lifted the pot on the table. End of this chapter.